Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is July 16, 2021, and we are doing a Hanging with the Sockdem Gang marathon, in which basically we went to the Kyle Kulinski Secular Talk channel on YouTube, clicked the Channels tab, went to a bunch of channels. There's like 3 dozen channels that Kyle promotes at Secular Talk, and then we grabbed some videos from the last week or two from some of these channels. I am getting caught up on some news, and it's a chance to have a little bit of, dialogue or criticism of the social democratic world from the Marxist world. So this third video is from the Thom Hartmann channel. That's Tom, Thom. And the title of this video is This Proof Trump Was Installed by Putin? I chose this video for a few reasons. First of all, from day one, did not believe the Russiagate thing. I remember when that was announced, like right after the election in 2016, and I remember like where I was sitting on the couch when I heard that, and there's this sort of shock and numbness washed over my body where I was just like, oh my God, they're running with the stupidest, craziest lie to cover up for like how unpopular Hillary Clinton was. And I think all that shock and numbness, it was like how deep of a hole, because when you lie, I mean, you put yourself in a bind. If it's not, strictly for self-defense in a very limited way, etc. If you're like lying and then trying to build things on a foundation of lies as like a way of life, as they were trying to do, you're digging yourself into a hole. It's not going to work long term. First of all, a lot of people are going to figure it out right off the bat, and it's just awkward. So I was just like, no, because I knew that this just meant U.S. politics were going to get exponentially worse and crazier, because now you had like a significant subset of the U.S. electorate that was going to be, trying to prop up this lie, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, Thom Hartmann he seems to go in big on the Trump-Putin Russiagate stuff, and it's, he'll have decent guests on once in a while, but he's so big on the pro-Democratic Party boomer bait shit, and this is just one example. For his sake, and I should say the other reason I'm doing this is I saw that a lot of these channels, the TYTs, etc., had a story, a video or two about this like leak of Russia stuff allegedly having something to do with the election of Trump. And so I'm curious because I don't even know what it is yet. We're going to be watching this cold, like we're watching all of these videos cold and commenting on them. So I hope for Thom Hartmann's sake, to the extent that I'm just a person of general good faith and well-wishing towards others, that the answer is no, that this is not proof. Give it up. It's 2021. Move the fuck on. No, Trump wasn't installed by Putin, and that's a quote from the fucking title. He wasn't installed by Putin. Even if you think that Russian propaganda or advertising campaigns somehow like tipped the scales for Trump, that's not the same as being installed. Anyway, let's see what this is all about. And for the love of God, Thom Hartmann, stop with the Trump-Putin stuff. It's just so bad. All right, let's go on.
I want to start with what appears to be the blockbuster news, with a huge caveat. And the blockbuster news is it's being reported by the Guardian, and they're reprinting parts of these documents, that they have received a leak from inside the Kremlin that Donald Trump was basically installed as president of the United States with the help of 3 different Russian spy agencies.
Okay, let me start by saying how not legit that sounds. You have a UK major news outlet getting a leak from the Kremlin about the US election 5 years after it happened. Why? I wonder if some of this is in response to Aaron Mate, who, I can't endorse everything he does. However, the Russiagate stuff, he's been pretty thorough debunking Russiagate. And I did see him on the Lee Camp Redacted Tonight last week talking about some of the stuff and just how thin the case that the U.S. is trying to pursue on the Trump-Russia stuff is, actually. So, I don't know. I wonder if some of this is in response to that. Some of these channels that have hundreds of thousands of subscribers, it's not inconceivable that several of them working in concert could make enough of a splash that an agency, some sort of intelligence agency, would try to get something out in the media like this to counter it. Anyway, let's go on. But definitely it seems like Thom is on the hook already.
Now, the huge caveat, as I said, there would be a caveat on this. The huge caveat on this is it possible that this itself is a Russian disinformation program? In other words, are these forged documents or tampered with documents or something like that were given to the Guardian for some reason? Have the Russians, for example, finally decided, that Donald Trump guy, he's probably more of a liability than an asset. And, perhaps they don't want him talking about his private conversations with President Putin or something like that. I mean, who knows? But the papers, they reference this meeting that happened, and you can read it all at theguardian.com, or .org, as I recall. But you can, in fact, let me just double check that. theguardian.com. Anyhow, the papers that they have suggest that there was this meeting in the Kremlin on the 22nd of January of 2016. Now,
all right, before we get into the nitty gritty of whatever fucking garbage he's about to read, just like he said it there himself, although he came to the wrong specific conclusion. He's like, swallowing the basic premise of, the Trump-Putin collusion and all this stuff. And anyway, that there's like this close-knit, Trump is the like Putin asset, etc. And now they're going to, that this could be disinformation, but not disinformation like not to keep people from realizing the entire thing was just bullshit from the start. Like that but he's accepting the premise that it came from inside Russia, that it's not just concocted out of whole cloth by like US, UK intelligence. And you see what I'm saying? It's like, he's like, okay, now let me question a little bit of the surface level and, spin off some like other wild conclusions that basically still don't challenge my incorrect underlying assumption, or probably incorrect underlying assumption. And then he goes on to like, maybe Putin's, deciding to throw Trump under the bus now. And it's like, or maybe the whole thing was made up and you're still falling for it, you fucking tool. Like the whole logic that he's applying here, it's just so egocentric in the sense of like, you look at this guy and the sort of meticulous appearance, and it's just imagining that like the rest of the world, and particularly Trump supporters, run on a similar kind of basis. No. Not everyone is this like button down left liberal that, has a huge brain and like carefully weighs all of these options while, of course, wearing a blindfold to what's right in front of you. Not everyone is like this. But again, this is what works on these people, I guess, is what we can effectively say out of all of this. As far as evaluating this as a propaganda effort, mission accomplished. Because you're getting this guy, and, again, not to give this guy too much credit. I don't know who he's working for, if anyone. But you've at least got this guy going out there modeling this stuff for his, gullible boomer base. I don't know who else buys into this stuff at this point, or ever, but I have yet to encounter a Trump supporter who's like, oh yeah. No, I was really for, the outspoken xenophobia and the sort of like blind, self-destructive tariffs and all that kind of stuff. But, the Putin thing really turned me around. No. Come on. This was never anything other than a drunken election night self-preservation campaign that just took on a life of its own out of the Hillary Clinton, presidential campaign. And just let it die. All right, continuing.
Keep in mind, that was the election year, but this was 11 months before the election, or 10 and a half months before the election. And what apparent, but it was also like within a few weeks of Donald Trump basically locking up the Republican nomination for president. He didn't have it yet, but he was walking away with it. And I mean, I think it was March is Super Tuesday, so he was still a couple of months away from just completely having this. But this is quoting from Luke Harding, is the principal author of this piece. And he writes, they agreed a Trump White House would help secure Moscow's strategic objectives, among them social turmoil in the U.S. and a weakening of the American president's negotiating position. Which, raises the question, was Trump installed in the United States by Russia? And perhaps a few other countries were in on it too, but yeah, it looks like this was a kind of a standalone project. And did it almost work?
Okay, now I'm confused. I did actually get up to stretch for a minute while I was listening to this. Are we saying it didn't work? What is going on here? Maybe a few other countries were involved. This is sort of desperate spinning, I think at best, is how it's striking me, of like, well, we may never know. The truth may be weirder than we ever knew, as a way of just trying to quietly retire this whole thing. But I don't know. I'm going to rewind that. Okay, so I listened to that clip again, and so what he's saying is that they have a memo that said they think a Trump presidency would be chaotic, that would, cause social unrest and discord, that would benefit them as an adversary of the U.S. Okay, I mean, that you don't have to be a genius to think something like that. But then he says, so did Russia install Trump, and did it almost work? Wait, did what almost work? Did they install him? How? Like, how did they install him? And then, like, we're going to need specifics. And then, did it almost work? Well, wait a minute. They did install him or they didn't install him? I'd say if they did it work? Or are you talking about the social unrest part working? Like, this is a mess. That's why I said it sounds like flailing and just trying to spin, trying to like jump ship. Let's go on with this clip, which has like another 7 or 8 minutes to it. Because this is, I'm confused.
The papers seen by The Guardian, Luke Harding writes in The Guardian, seem to represent a serious and highly unusual leak from the Kremlin. He goes on to say, there's no doubt that meeting in January actually took place. There was an official photo of President Putin there at the time that was released. The papers suggest that, and by the way, the Kremlin now is saying these are forgeries. These are not real. Dmitry Peskov, who is the kind of official spokesman for the Kremlin, said that this was a great pulp fiction. But the report says Trump is, quote, the most promising candidate, end quote, from the Kremlin's point of view. There's a brief psychological assessment of him in which he is described in this report as, quote, impulsive, mentally unstable, and unbalanced individual who suffers from an inferiority complex. And the Luke Harding, the author for The Guardian, writes, this is pretty much the way that they would describe something like this. He goes on to say there's also apparent confirmation that the Kremlin possesses compromat or potentially compromising material. On the future president collected, the document says, from Trump's, quote, earlier non-official visits to Russian Federation territory.
Okay, so you got nothing. You got absolutely nothing. You got a psychological evaluation of if Russia could wave a magic wand and pick one of these candidates for being mentally unstable and easy to manipulate. Yeah, I mean, I could have told you that. And then, quote, possible confirmation of compromat from earlier non-official visits to Russia. You got nothing there. You've got empty assertions. You have nothing. I guess this is, when you run a show this long every day, this is what you have to fill it with. There's nothing. It's air. It's empty space. Okay? You got nothing here. I'm just kind of astounded that they ran with this late in the game. Let's continue.
Quote, certain events, end quote, that happened during his trip to Moscow. But and then the paper says it is acutely necessary to use all possible force to facilitate Trump's election to the post of U.S. president. So, it has, this is in The Guardian, which is a credible newspaper. It's based out of the UK. It's the progressive newspaper for the United Kingdom. They have a U.S. edition. It's at the top of Drudge right now, so that it's starting to make its way into the way typically that right-wing propaganda travels is it starts out in a more obscure publication, the Daily Caller or something, and then it goes to Drudge, and then from Drudge it goes to the New York Times and the Washington Post, and et cetera. And I haven't seen, now the last time I checked was about an hour ago, I haven't seen the New York Times or the Washington Post pick this up. It was not on NPR this morning. I listened to that as I was walking into work. But I am guessing that at the very least they will soon be reporting that The Guardian is reporting, and that there are questions about the veracity of this.
Yeah, there are questions about the veracity of it. You have no reason to believe that. There's no substance. So this is the problem. Even if we want something to be true, it doesn't make it so, and you just can't believe it on the basis that you want to believe it. Would The Guardian lie? Yeah, it's conceivable. You cannot say this is true because The Guardian printed it. You cannot say that. Cannot. And then this whole lead up of right-wingers will say it's not true because it's The Guardian. I'm saying you can't say either way. It sounds like bullshit to me because it's the same bullshit that's been coming out for years now. And after 5 years, this is the fucking smoking gun we've been waiting for. There's nothing here. If there was something here, would there not be more of it found by now? Just really think about it.
But I'm looking at this and thinking, whether this is a forgery or not. I mean, that was supposed to be in January. It was in April that Russian intelligence services, according to the Mueller report and U.S. intelligence services, that the Russians hacked the DNC and published Hillary Clinton's emails and, in ways to embarrass her, to harm her as the candidate, that I think you could probably very safely argue helped set up the election of Donald Trump. Congressman Pocan has pointed out in this program that there was, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. My recollection, it was something like 120,000, but there was a substantial fall off in Democratic turnout in Wisconsin. And it wasn't just unique to Wisconsin. This was happening across the country. But again, keep in mind, Paul Manafort, the campaign manager for Trump, was giving state-by-state polling information to Russian intelligence.
Maybe it's just that I don't listen to enough of this guy, but I cannot believe he is relitigating this stuff. He starts off by saying, even if this is a complete forgery, ... like, let's relitigate all the other paper-thin stuff. WikiLeaks, give it up. There's nothing there. Nothing. You know, here's your left, quote unquote left. This is promoted by the Kyle Kalinske Secular Talk channel. Here's your big brain social democrat, hawking Russiagate, paper thin. We're going on 5 years here, and this is the best they got. Is imagine if this were true. Okay, but is it? You got nothing. So now he's talking about Paul Manafort and like polling data specific. What the fuck? Could it have been that Hillary Clinton was up against, yes, a treacherous opponent, and she laid down due to just hubris and arrogance? That she didn't campaign in a lot of these states? That she spat in the faces of a lot of the Bernie people, the left wing of the Democratic Party, and people who weren't even Democrats, but were trying to hold their nose and get involved. And she was like kicking them out the door, like, we don't need you. Could that have been? Could that have been? But again, no, it's Russia. It's Russia. I can't believe we're still having this. Well, we're not, but I can't believe anyone is still having this conversation. He's looking straight into the camera and saying Russiagate nonsense after all this time. There's still a few minutes left.
And we know from the Mueller report that some of the Russian intelligence agencies were then feeding Facebook and Twitter, in particular Facebook accounts, feeding information into those individual states to discourage, in particular, the Hillary Clinton super predator comment was being directed towards groups that had a lot, Facebook groups that had a lot of black people in them, particularly in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. And I mean, it just looks like this is exactly what happened.
Thom Hartmann couldn't even finish that sentence. It was such garbage. I am so disgusted listening to this. They went into a few Facebook groups. Guess what? So did I. Do you think I swung the election? I went into Facebook groups and did electioneering. Did I swing the election, Tom? Give me a break. This is bullshit. This is so cringeworthy, sad, and disgusting. It's just appalling. This is still going on in the quote-unquote left. Stop. Get some help. Really. Just stop.
I'm not saying it is or it did, but what we do know, or at least what we believe we know based on U.S. intelligence, and that I think is pretty widely accepted. We all saw the leaks through WikiLeaks. Is that they pulled this thing off? So if this was the case?
Wait a minute. Talk about trying to have it both ways. He literally, in back-to-back sentences, says, it looks like they pulled it off. If this is what happened, wait a minute. You're saying it happened, and then you're just saying an if after the fact. You're clearly telling your audience to believe this. Then you're saying if. Stop.
What do you think? Is it... I remember the movie The Manchurian Canada. I mean, it came out like in the 50s or 60s. And the whole theory was that a foreign government, and I think it was the Soviet Union, I'm not sure that it was named in the movie. This was before the fall of the Soviet Union. But that a foreign government would install their guy as president of the United States, and then he would set about systematically dismantling and crippling our ability to protect ourselves, essentially. our ability to defend the nation. And just by coincidence, at the same time that this news comes out, there's a new book out suggesting that that's exactly what happened. General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was basically organizing a mass resignation across the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying that, if Trump tries to stage a coup, and he was very concerned that that was happening, that he was not going to let that happen.
I need to step in here. We still have a minute left. So he just mentioned Trump trying to stage a coup and whatnot. We'll get to January 6th in just a second. First of all, the fucking boomer-laden nonsense. There was a movie one time. First of all, that's not the movie, okay? The movie is not WikiLeaks and whatever the fuck else. That is a stretch beyond the conceivable, any parallels you could draw. That was a horrible, horrible comparison. Anyway, as far as he's like, and that's, what happened. No, it isn't what happened. Go watch the movie again. It's not even close. Okay. Second of all, about a coup. The January 6th thing, I think, is concerning. I'm not on board with the Democratic Party where, they want to make it into a new 9/11. But there's a real political phenomenon called fascism. It wasn't invented in the 21st century. It's much older than that. It's a thing that capitalists sometimes turn to when they are really concerned about the stability of their system, and when there's a rising left wing, which arguably you could say is not really there yet in the US, although you do have a resurgence at least of the Bernie Sanders type left, which is something really neoliberalism had suppressed for a number of decades very successfully. But anyway, with Nixon, you saw a shift to the right. With Reagan, you saw a big shift to the right. And George H.W. Bush. With the Gingrich Congress, you saw a shift to the right, and Bill Clinton. With Bush and Cheney in the 2000s and the War on Terror, you saw a shift to the right, and on and on. It seems like the U.S. capitalists are just going further and further right, the occasional step backwards, at least on the surface. And there's not much further right you can go at this point. Fascism is a phenomenon. We have an ongoing playlist on this channel that capitalists sometimes use to defend their system, but it also makes them uneasy. Hence, you see, for example, the Democrats freaking out about January 6th. And, January 6th is not a good moment for any socialist either. You don't really want a movement composed of the kind of people standing for the kind of things that the MAGA rally was all about. That's not what we want to see in power as socialists. But the Democrats doing a lot of pearl clutching about that when they know goddamn well it's their system that Trump is upholding, albeit with a different style of governance. But this is capitalism. When you get in bed with capitalism and commit to that system, hey, sometimes it needs a fascist regime to prop it up. And that's arguably where the U.S. is at. This whole notion of trying to pin blame for this on Russia is absurd. Look the call is coming from inside the house. Look no further. Now, capitalism is an international phenomenon. The capitalist class is international. But again, you don't need to look to Russia for it. Look right here in the U.S. This is a homegrown phenomenon. And again, it's part of capitalism's natural defense system. So this whole contortion and contrivance to somehow take people's awareness away from that and to pin it onto Russia, it's misleading, it's factually inaccurate, and it just does a giant disservice to the audience who may be trying to get an education from this guy. Continuing.
According to the book, he referred to Trump supporters at a march to protest the election as, quote, brown shirts in the streets. He openly worried after Trump purged the Defense Department. Now, this happened right after the election, right after Trump lost the election. He got rid of Mark Esper in the Defense Department and replaced him with Chris Miller. Chris Miller was the guy who wrote the memo to the National Guard saying, you may not help out the Capitol Police, you'll recall. Milley, at the Times, told his associates that he believed Trump was, quote, the classic authoritarian leader with nothing to lose, according to this book. And, you know, and is portrayed as basically the guy who stood in the way. Another excerpt from the book has this conversation between Milley and Nancy Pelosi. After Trump fired Esper, Pelosi called up Milley and said, we're all trusting you, remember your oath. And she was concerned that Trump might even blow off nuclear weapons in a desperate attempt to stay in power. And Milley says, don't worry. I guarantee you these processes are very good. There's not going to be an accidental firing of nuclear weapons. And Pelosi says, how can you guarantee me? And Milley says, ma'am, there's a process. We will only follow legal orders. We will only do things that are legal, ethical, and moral.
Okay, I don't know where to begin with this. I guess let's begin with who the fuck cares about this book? And then maybe next we can go to we will only do things that are legal, ethical, and moral. Yeah, okay, I'm sure. Your choice here between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is between virulent imperialism that doesn't care about U.S. or non-U.S. working people, or the fascist version of imperialism that also doesn't care about U.S. working people or foreign working people. You know, neither is good, for sure. But this is when you start contorting your brain into these like Trump singular threat things. Because if it wasn't Trump, it would be someone else. These are needs of the system. Trump just happened to be a good fit for those needs. But the Tea Party was before Trump. Bush and Cheney were before Trump. And the Minutemen and all the other right-wing paramilitary groups, this was all before Trump. They have just coalesced now. That's the difference. They've been building for decades. This is a problem with this system. It's not going away by anything the Democrats are going to do. They are fundamentally impotent in dealing with the right-wing menace in this country, of which they're a part and accomplice. So, anyway, I mean, that's why I started a channel on Marxism. And, you know, if we want actually anti-fascist alternatives here, you need to go to Marxism, socialism, communism. You need to escape this entire paradigm presented to you by U.S. politics and by people like Thom Hartmann. And I'm going to leave it at that. This video was despicable, but hopefully you've gained something by this criticism of it. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall. You can sign up for as little as $2. If that's not your cup of tea, liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting all help to boost this video and to boost this channel. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you in the next video.